It's the Awake Space Astrology podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Mars is now in Leo, and it is about to oppose Pluto this week. I'll be talking about that here on the Awake Space Astrology podcast. We're also going to get you ready for that new moon on the 27th. This is some very dynamic energy that gets us ready for May and June, which are even more dynamic. I know everybody's a little bit tired, and the Mars-Pluto opposition might have some people feeling more energized. Other people might be feeling kind of sleepy. Being aware of your own energy right now is really, really important. And that's something I'll be talking about with you here on the podcast. This week, we are in a time of massive systemic change. My guidance was very, very clear just a few weeks ago as Neptune was moving into Aries, and it was job done, warnings are over, which means we're fully in this time of systemic change. That's not something to fear, but it is something that we have to navigate. So next stage is where we're at. The warnings are over. Now it is time to move with the energy and understanding how to navigate through resistance patterns. So we're going to talk a little bit about patterns, resistance, and otherwise here on the Awake Space. I asked the patrons at the magazine level and up to throw me some questions to answer here on the public podcast. And there's one I'll answer on the patron-only podcast that has to do with the Canadian elections. So let's get this week started because this is a pretty Monday-ish Monday with the moon in Aquarius conjunct Pluto as Mars is in opposition. It's very dynamic energy. And so grab your coffee, grab your tea, get your matcha, get your water or your hot cocoa, your iced tea, definitely your H2O. And whether we're taking the kids to school or maybe they're on spring break and we're going to the park or we're taking care of our chores at home, folding laundry, washing dishes, taking a hot girl or hot guy walk, taking the dog to the dog park, or giving the kitties some catnip. If we have to drive to work, may we get perfect parking together. I'm glad to be joining you in whatever it is that you do. So let's get this party started. I made sure I got my reading glasses with me so I can check the astrology here. I've mostly got the studio all put together. So I'm still working on some lights. So if you're not sure about the lighting, don't worry about it. We'll get it fixed. But the sound interface and the camera are working. And let me tell you, that was a Herculean task trying to put that together. Especially since my helpers are down for the count. Mom's arm is healing. Dad got some food poisoning, so he's recovering from that. It's been super fun here. But they were my extra pairs of hands to get things put together, so the lighting will come. But if I have to put together one more stand by myself, I am too impatient. I know you all think I'm patient, but I'm not. All right. So as I record this, we have the moon exiting Capricorn. I'm recording this on Sunday, April 20th. Yes, it is Easter. And I'm recording this earlier than normal so that I can have it all edited and time to go out in the early hours tomorrow so I can actually get good night's sleep. Having this podcast studio has been immensely useful for my sleep habits because I don't have my laptop where I'm at. I keep it in my office, so I can't work on it in the middle of the night. Teach this workaholic. Haha. Anyway, so the minute we have the moon move into Aquarius, which it's due to do that Sunday night, it will be in an opposition to Mars. And I said we would have a historic event on April 19th, 20th. And there have been some. It's just there's so many things going on that people are so desensitized to the WTF-ness of life that everybody thinks that this is just normal. But this stuff that's going on right now, it's not normal, whether it's political, economic, climate. It's all abnormal. Okay. If you ever saw Young Frankenstein, we're definitely in the abnormal zone. So with the moon moving into opposition with Mars, there's probably going to be some big feelings, on the individual level, especially with people who don't know how to hold their consciousness steady. So people who are knee-jerk reactors, people who don't know how to hold their consciousness. A few weeks back, I read the Rudyard Kipling poem "If," and that's if you haven't read it, do read it. It was written almost 100 years ago. Well, probably over 100 years ago now, because Rudyard Kipling died in 1935. But it's got dated language. But just read the beginning part. If you can keep your head when others are losing theirs, that's holding your consciousness. If you can respond versus react, that makes all the difference. Okay. There are people who aren't good at that. And I think we all have people like that in our lives. And sometimes we are that person, right? Because no matter how much we practice and do our breathing exercises, our mental exercises, our emotional exercises, everybody has a trigger point, right? And this is going to be intense energy. So don't beat yourself up if you lose your temper or you say something that you'd rather not have said, or if you have some kind of reaction that's maybe a little bigger, bolder than you normally would. Some people may be having a breakthrough with this energy. They may have a big awareness with this energy. And that can be startling because, everybody wants to be awake and aware. But most of the time, the awakenings are pretty startling. We very rarely wake up with the sun streaming on our face and the birds singing, and we often don't pay attention to that. We often feel like, somebody's got ice cold hands and put them on our tummy. Never had that happen. My great grandma used to wake me up that way when I wouldn't get up in time for church when I was a little girl. And oof, you are wide awake and wide aware. And it takes crisis usually to bring us to awarenesses. And sometimes, especially when we become aware of how we've been a contributor to some of the less pleasant things that happen in life, right? That's pretty hard when we realize that we didn't feel valuable enough to attract people into our life who would see the value in us. Right? This doesn't mean we ever deserve bad treatment, but like I said, we're going to talk about patterns, whether it's resistance patterns, family patterns, etc. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to teaching the law of attraction. Because sometimes it sounds like it's victim shaming or blaming. And I used to feel exactly the same way. I'd hear those words and I'd be like, how dare you? How dare you? I didn't choose it. I didn't ask for it. Why on earth would anyone try to say that? And when we come to understand that it's maybe not a choice, but it is a vibrational pattern, like in a family pattern. So if your family were very oppressed and they lived generationally in oppressive regimes, at the, let's say, and in air quotes, the lower social position, if they didn't have a lot of longevity in order to gain the wisdom, okay, there would have been just enough time to get a couple of patterns, which included a condition of allowing harsh treatment or not being able to seek liberation with ease. And most of us don't come from the upper echelons in society, or at least not all of our family. Like for me, it's kind of a mixed bag. Okay, there were some of my ancestors were pretty well heeled, very educated. I grew up with my great and great great grandfather's library, and Some of those books were also my great and great great grandmothers, women who could read, unheard of in the early and mid 1800s, right? And then on the other side of the family, on my mom's side, I've talked about this many times. My mother's sister was the first woman in that matrilineal line to live past 40. Okay. With my grandmother, their mother, being the first to make it past 31. Their grandmother having died at 28 and their great grandmother having died at 21, coming from extreme poverty and lots of abuse and being forced to have many, many children because they had no options. And so, we can blame parents all we want, but we have family patterns and we don't have to get to the root of the pattern. We just need to know where we want to go. But by identifying a pattern, we can then say, oh, there is this pattern of not allowing respectful treatment because there was no example. That's enough to know. We don't have to get into the because blah, 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 because you probably won't get to the root of the problem. You can blame the great greats or the great great greats or the great 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 greats. It goes very, very far back. Okay. You probably can't get to the bottom of it, but you don't need to get to the bottom of it to move forward and find healing. And as we are in this time of massive systemic change, massive, we have the opportunity to create new pathways. And so by noticing the pattern and then correcting our course with deliberation, we're able to be more empowered. Okay. And we don't have to be destructive to gain internal liberation. We don't have to fight to have that internal liberation. If each one of us understood our value and how precious we are in the great cosmic scheme of things, we would probably have a whole lot less conflict because people would feel satisfied and reasonably content and not necessarily covet what somebody else has or be jealous of somebody else's skills, abilities, natural talents, beauty, etc. And I say all of this because we are in a time of awakening where so many people, including people who have spent this lifetime and probably many others, being more aware to have unfoldings, because you wake up every single morning, right? Unless you haven't slept. You wake up many times in a lifetime and you have unfoldings many times in a lifetime as you grow, as your understanding matures, as your life experience contributes to the understanding in this physical body, in this physical lifetime. And so with the moon moving into Aquarius, that's very bright, sharp, clearly defined energy. It's epiphanies, it's collaborations as well. And it's recognizing what needs disruption. And you can disrupt a pattern. Okay, disruption isn't always negative. Being disruptive changes the status quo. Well, the status quo has been changed a long time ago, and we're moving into creating new pathways. And that's why it's very awkward, we could say. So Monday is probably going to be a really Mondayest Monday. It's going to be very, very interesting as the moon moves into opposition on Sunday night to oppose Mars. People might have interesting dreams. They might be sleep deprived. They might wake up from interesting dreams. You might get a $1,000,000 idea in the middle of the night. How that shows up is dependent on your own makeup and your own mindset. And I think as Pluto goes through Aquarius, I think mindset is going to be something people really have under the microscope, because mindset is how we navigate life. If we always think it's going to be hard, if we always think it's going to suck, the suckage just comes, you know. And so learning how to adapt, remember that's your word for 2025, learning how to adapt and move and flow with the energy instead of being in resistance against it. And if you're a magazine subscriber in the Awake Space Patreon, then remember I have issues from last year where I wrote articles in a long form essay format called The Work. And one of those was on identifying resistance patterns. Sometimes they're in our behavior. Sometimes we can notice them in our language. Sometimes we can notice those in our physical body. Whether it's tension patterns. So when you do somatic work and somatic healing, sometimes it's in our word patterns. Okay. And I'll hear that in clients all the time, and I'll ask them to reframe. Right? So when we think, I'm never going to get there, I don't believe anybody cares or nobody likes me, I'm always going to be on my own. I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired is a word pattern when we're talking about apathy. Apathy doesn't mean don't care. Apathy means you don't have the power or feel like you don't have the power or have agency over something. And there are things we don't have power over. But we do have power over us and how we react. And so that tiredness sometimes isn't just a physical tired. It can be an emotional tired, a psychological tired, because we're fighting against a status quo or a current reality that we don't like, and that can be very difficult to manage. So there's that. Next up, there will probably be people who, again, as they knee jerk because they don't know how to hold their consciousness steady, or maybe they don't have a lot of practice at it. And that can be our young people, our toddlers, even our animals. They might be a little more nervous. They might have bad dreams because remember, they're very sensitive to energy. They might have past life memories come up. Don't ever make past life memories with your kids like this huge deal. Okay. Most kids can remember a little bit or communicate it in a different way. Whether they do with you or not is kind of up to them. It's not something for us to pry out of them or sensationalize. Okay. I know we believe like that makes us special if we have those memories, but it's actually really, really human. And when we're really young, it's easier because we haven't been taught in reality, that we haven't got the life experience of people thinking it's weird or wrong or blah, 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 whatever it is that shuts people down with their connection. So just listen, and they might be very concerned and disturbed. They might cry. They might sound like an adult. I remember when my son was about 4 years old, I had put him down for his bedtime, and about an hour later, I heard these racking sobs that weren't a toddler's like sobs, and I ran into the room because it was unusual, and I would have run in whether he's if he was crying, no matter what. But I came in, and he had his hands on his head and sobbing, and my father, the king is dead. I arrived too late. I don't want to be king. Now, whether he was processing something he saw on television or in a movie, even though he hadn't, to my knowledge, seen that. But it could have been processing something he had seen way before, or it was a past life he was remembering. And he had other ones as well. This one was just pretty dramatic. I just held him and I let him process his feelings, and I let him know, well, hey, right here, right now, mommy is with you. Mommy is with you. And, reassured him and laid down with him and let him go back to sleep. And everything was fine after that. So, when we over sensationalize things, that puts weight on a kid's shoulder. It's it's better not to treat it like it's abnormal. And remember, they're always listening, even if you're talking on the phone to a friend and you think your little one's in another room playing. They're probably hearing what you're talking about. So remember that. Okay. Kids pick up everything. So if your little ones, if your animals are acting up, you want to soothe them as much as possible. Now, we weather-wise on Monday, we might see some big electrical storms. I know we've already been having the hail and the lightning and the thunder, etc. More of that, and maybe more dramatic, like really big thunder, strange lightning, big hail. And I'll talk more about this in the headlines in the patron only podcast as well. I'll give a little update about what I think we're going to see this week. It was a very historic moment. Remember, I said the 19th would see a historic moment. Well, for the Supreme Court to rule in the middle of the night, 7-2, that was pretty historic. I think sometimes people always think it's, I don't know. I don't know what you want half the time. It's mind blowing to me. The things that are happening that really are out of order or not normal, and everybody's just like, oh well, somebody acted crazy again. But yeah, so this week starts off pretty much with a bang, and that bang continues as we roll in to the last part of April and into May. So I created this new chat in the Awake Space Patreon called Deep Dives with Laurie, and it's for magazine subscribers and up. And that's where I'm going to go more in depth into what I see politically, weather-wise, and just in the astrology, and including in how we can use the energy. The Awake Space Lounge is still our lighthearted connection, answering general astrology questions, that kind of thing. But the deep dive will happen now in that chat. And that's for magazine subscribers and up. And I asked patrons today to give me some questions, and I have rules around my questions. So I thought this one was perfect because I talked a little bit about family patterns already, and that was prepping you for this one. How common would you say, and this is from actually, how common would you say it is for families / friends to have some of the same sign house or / house placements? Example, my husband, daughter, and I are all Virgo rising, and then my son, daughter, and I are all Leo moons. Also, wondering if we tend to gravitate more to those who have some of the same complementary or opposing signs and or placements. It's a really good question, and it's far more common than most people imagine, because again, we have family patterns, right? And so those patterns are reflected astrologically. You can see, especially those inner planets play along. Sometimes families have a ton of March birthdays. Sometimes people have a ton of, October birthdays. And then there's the odd man out, but they'll still have maybe a house placement that's the same. But it's expressed differently. So like my brother and I, we both have 9th house Mercuries, and we're both nerds in our own ways, but we learn very differently, and we teach very differently, and we express ourselves very differently. And we both are very opinionated, but in very different directions, although we meet in the middle as well and try to seek understanding. But our Mercuries are actually squared. And so, boy, did we fight over things. I mean, over the dumbest stuff as kids. I'd like the black horse, he'd like the brown horse, and then we fight over which one was better until we figured out we both liked the horses we were looking at. That's a silly example, but that's kind of describing that square. When it comes to family and family patterns, then yes, you will see you will see either, a bunch of risings or a rising reflected in a moon, or so like my mom's a Leo rising, my dad's a Leo, my brother is a Leo rising, and my midheaven is Leo. Okay, so it's a little different with me. Um, my mom is a Gemini. My brother has his moon and Venus in Gemini. And I think it's Mars. I have to go look. But anyway, and I have Venus in Gemini. I'm a Cancer. My mom doesn't have any Cancer placements. My dad has a Cancer Venus. So, and my brother doesn't have that. So it helped me understand the dynamics because my parents and my brother have a lot more simpatico placements, and I was there. I'm connected, but it's not the same. I was a little bit shyer. I was quieter. They were more into the fray because my brother's an Aries with a Leo rising. My dad's a Leo with an Aries rising. And so it was interesting once I became an astrologer to kind of look at that little family unit and go, oh, okay, that's why I was different from them. Yeah. They'll do more things together, whereas I'll take quality time. But sitting and watching TV together is probably not my idea of quality time, where it is theirs. They're just in the same room together, or they go do things together in a different way. So it doesn't mean any of it's wrong, right? And then my daughter has a Libra moon. She's my lunar return child. My mom has a Libra moon. Her mother had a Libra moon, and her mother had a Libra moon. And I think it goes back about 6 generations. And I thought that was very interesting. And there was a lot of codependency, enmeshment on the negative side, things that had to be healed, and then learning what true partnership and mutuality is. And you could see it in each generation as the lessons came in. And none of us are going to heal every family pattern, so a lot of times what I hear is I'm taking on the healing. I'm going to heal the family trauma. I'm going to heal the generational trauma. And I'm sorry, but it took a lot of people to get that trauma. You're never going to be healing up every ounce of it. Your job is to heal it within you as much as you can see and find. Don't rob your children of their job. Hopefully we heal enough to give them more tools, but they get to take it forward. It's very egotistical to put it on ourselves solely. Okay, so there's so much more we can do by empowering the next generation to take it further, because healing doesn't just stop at recognition and maybe avoiding behavior, but rather enhancing new behaviors. And so watching that next generation move forward. I was just speaking to my daughter on a business matter, and I said, I'm so glad to see you doing what I've always known you'd be able to do. And she said, yeah, I just needed to know in myself. And I said, yeah. I said, you have no idea how ready I am to pass a baton. It isn't about putting the responsibility on someone else's shoulders, but it's recognizing their capabilities. And as one of my mentors once told me, don't rob your clients of their experience. Don't rob the person in front of you for healing or energy work of their pain, because that's their experience, but you can ameliorate the healing process. And that's quite something to wrap your head around when we're talking about our children, that they do have an experience, and being able to trust their soul to navigate the personality through this experience. So I know I'm about to start teaching some parent child astrology or generational astrology. I know, it's exciting. Just hold tight. Okay. We've got the studio now. I can start making more videos. I can teach all the things I want to teach. It's very exciting. So the short answer is, yeah, we can see family patterns. And when it comes to friendships, etc., that's synastry, of course. But it doesn't always mean like somebody's Jupiter sits, on your moon, or maybe your Venus is conjunct somebody's moon, or your North Node or South Node. Those can be very meaningful relationships, but they don't always mean they're forever relationships, as it depends on, are both people growing and moving through life on the same pathway. You're going to stay more connected if that's the case, or if one of you grows faster or chooses a different path, then you may move apart. It doesn't make somebody right or wrong. It just is what it is. But yeah, we do tend to be attracted to people um, who, the opposition tends to breed a lot of chemistry. There's a spark there that desires synthesis, and conjunctions tend to be like, you know, pretty easy energy. It can be dynamic, depends on what's conjuncting what. Um, but yeah, when we have like a Venus Moon conjunction, or a Venus Mars conjunction, or the moon conjunct the sun, or the sun and the ascendant conjunct, or the first house, just a planet falling in the first house, it can be like, oh, I'm comfortable with this energy. This energy is really cool with me. So again, I'll get a synastry class going. You do have the love and sexuality class in the Patreon, where I defined and described love outside of romantic love as well, whether we're in a family relationship, a friendship, or romantic love, and how they express in the astrology chart. It's a really good class, and it's like about an hour and a half long. But all patrons at the $5 level and up get it. So you might want to go check your goodies in the Patreon. Anna is asking, I've been trying to understand transits better, especially how to make sense of aspects to natal planets. I know that's where the personal stuff really shows up, but I get overwhelmed trying to piece everything together. Like, what do you even focus on first? There's so much going on. Isn't that the truth? Especially when we have really dynamic energy shifts happening. So, like this year, we have Pluto in Aquarius. Mars finally got out of Cancer and moved into Leo. We had Neptune move into Aries. We're going to have Jupiter move into Cancer. We're going to have Uranus move into Gemini. So there's a lot of dynamic energy. On the daily, we have the moon. It changes signs every 2.5 days. We've got Mercury that changes signs usually every 3 weeks or so. We've got Venus that takes about a month to move through a sign unless it's retrograde. Mars takes about 6 weeks to move through a sign unless it's retrograde. And just those inner planets and luminaries, the sun changes signs every 30 days. Where do you start? Well, first of all, how to find transits is a beginning video that all patrons get, including free. It's a free video that explains what transits are. Second of all, as far as understanding aspects and the meaning of aspects and how the planets operate in aspect to one another is really what you need to learn first before you look at transits. And then where do you start? Well, I always look, I go through the order of the planets. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. That's where you start. But I think a lot of times people want to run before they can walk. It's just part of what happens is you think, oh, I can look this up on a website. And it is overwhelming because being an astrologer is a lot like driving, a stick shift, or I'm trying to think of a better analogy because most people don't drive stick shifts anymore. But it's multitasking almost. You're using left and right hemispheres of the brain, left and right hand. You synthesize things. So I'll be teaching another transit class soon. I think I got the aspects up. I haven't got the transits up for Astrology Crew yet, but we'll be looking at transits soon. So, but the aspects 1 and 2, I think I got up into the Patreon. I'll have to check. So where do you start? Start in the order of the planets. Look at what is transiting what. Now, when I write my horoscopes, And I think this is as good as time as any to talk about that. So when I write my horoscopes, I always say read for the rising sign. That tends to confuse people a whole lot. And so I give instructions, right? So if your rising sign is between 0 and 15 degrees, you tend to want to read for the sign itself, that the one that you know that is your rising sign. If it's from degrees plus, then you're going to read for the next sign. It doesn't change your chart. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't, like, I have a 15-degree Scorpio rising. So I usually read for Sagittarius, and it doesn't make me a Sag rising. I'm still very much a Scorpio rising, right? I've got the ultimate resting bitch face. I'm a Scorpio rising. However, when I'm writing for the horoscopes, I'm thinking about all of the transiting planets and how they would be activating the different areas of life as represented by the houses in an astrology chart. Now, I do use Placidus houses as an astrologer when I'm doing my predictions and I'm doing readings for people, right? So I use Placidus. However, when I'm writing for a general audience, I'm having to use a whole sign because it's not individual, it's for a general audience. So we're assuming each house is at 0 degrees. It's like an equal thing. So that's why I ask you to read for the next sign if you have a later degree rising sign. So when I'm writing the horoscopes, if you can read between the lines, I'm not mentioning the astrology. I'm not talking about Mars ingressing into somebody's 8th house or Uranus triggering off the 2nd house of someone else or Pluto crossing someone's descendant. But I'm writing about the themes. And if you've really been studying astrology, you'll start to pick up what I'm talking about in that horoscope. Otherwise, I'll be teaching some classes on this. Astrology has never been buy a book and become an expert subject. It's always been something where it's mentorship, and you can have many teachers and mentors in a lifetime. Okay, I've had so many good teachers over the years as a young astrologer. Um, Even once I started reading professionally, I would do professional development because that's what people who are serious about what they're doing do. They go and they learn from those who have more knowledge and more experience, especially the experience. So you can build upon that in your own way. Okay. So there we go. I hope that answered that question. But in general, just go down the line. See, is anything aspecting my sun? Is anything aspecting my moon? Is anything aspecting? I just start with conjunctions, oppositions, trines and squares. See what's next. What are we going to talk about next? I love those questions. I look forward to more. We had one about Canada. And then somebody asked me about the New York mayoral election. I'm going to just tell you, I don't do mayor elections because it requires actually a lot more charts. I'll look at like a country, but in general, with Canada, somebody asked me to look at Canada. I'll look at Canada. I've already looked at it. I've talked about it. This person must have missed me talking about it, but I'll talk about it on the Patreon only. There's some interesting things coming up with Canada's chart and this particular date. As far as mayoral races, it actually takes a lot more charts, and I'm not feeling it. It's too much. I have too much other work to do, so it takes a lot of effort. Just because you can make a chart for free on the internet doesn't mean that you're going to be able to delineate it in quick time. I know what I want to address. I had a comment on one of my videos on TikTok, and this person had said, all you astrologers are full of it. The eclipses, people hyped up the eclipses and nothing has happened. And I said, or you just don't understand it and you just want instant gratification because eclipse energy rings out over time. There's too many people who think they know how astrology works or what it means to be an astrologer or a psychic or intuitive or an energy worker. People have this Hollywood idealism or this idea that somehow there's this instant knowing, and that's not how it works, you know. And so I will say to any of you who are readers, don't ever worry about comments like that, because it's that their ignorance is actually up on deck for all to see. Instant gratification isn't going to happen. We're at the very beginning of the Pluto and Aquarius era. We are going to be watching massive systemic change continue on over time. Will all of the disruptive events that are happening right now continue in the same vein? Maybe not. Maybe not. We'll find out towards the end of April. And I'll be talking about that on the Patron Only podcast, because I can go a little bit more in depth there than I feel like going here. As far as what's going to come up in May, I'll talk about that next week on next Monday's podcast. I think this weekend is going to be pretty interesting coming up as we move through. And again, I'll go through what's in the headlines in the Patron Only podcast, but I'll touch base with that here in just a minute. Right now, I want to do some patron shout outs, because once again, the Awake Space Astrology podcast is 100% listener supported by listeners like you. You can support us at patreon.com/the Awake Space. All kinds of new stuff. I get to do live streams to all patrons, whether you're free or paid. So once a month, I'm going to be doing a for sure scheduled live stream for all patrons, but I tend to be a pretty whimsical lass, and I'll be jumping on sometimes, but you'll be able to at least put something in your calendar when I get the schedule up. But in general, I just kind of go live when I feel like it. I have a ninth house Sun and Mercury, and I have Mars and Sag. If I overschedule myself, it just doesn't work. Okay. So, but the recordings get to go up as well. And I promise I'll read the questions. I didn't do that, just the test one. And people are like, those are hard to keep up with. And I was like, yeah, I listened to the playback. I hear it. I was non sequitur. You had no idea what I was talking about. So the second one, which is up now, I did that for $5 level and up. And I'll do another all patrons before the end of the month's out, now that we know how the system works on there. I'm super excited. It's a lot like a TikTok live without me feeling assaulted, because that's what it's like on TikTok. I just really don't like going live there. It's just, I don't know why people think they can just be rude to strangers. I would be mortified if I did that to people and just walked up and said rude things. So I keep it patron only. And again, I can do it for free patrons as well. So if you've been on the fence about joining Patreon, you can join for free and you'll still get a monthly live stream, and probably more than one. Alrighty, let's do some patron shout outs, because again, without my patrons, there's no podcast. So all right, our newest members. We've got La Mom, Morgan, Patrick, Stephanie, April, Jennifer, Ashmack, Sarah, Carla, Circe, Crazy MXN, Danielle, AOE, Rosalina, Jenny, Michelle, Courtney, LaKay, Leona, Alicia, Jackie, Astral Fog, Augustina. Oh, what a lovely name. One of my favorites. Myra, Annabelle, Jeanette, Megan, Jackie, Jess, Leanie, 10 cats in a trench coat. I love that one. Alfie, Megan, Phoebe, Tammy, Amy, Ava Onassis, Tiffany, Jackie, Juno, Shay, MLMK, Beezy, Sarah, Jessica, Kathy, Kateri, Alicia, Sierra, Lisa, Kay, Bernice, Sierra, 406 BP. Oh, wait. Wish this was bigger. Oh, 406 BJO, Rebecca, the Scented Gin, Sue, Amber, Leah, Holly, RB, Nova or Neva. Shall we say Tara or Tara, Corey, Kate, or is it Cozy? I see a Cozy. Cass, Grim, Pedro, Ellen, and Eileen, Stefan, Yoko, Eli, Deanne, or Diana, or Diane. It could be any one of those three. This is how you know I can't see, because I'm like trying to get it. Heather, Shauna, Willow, Peyton, Jess, Just Jay, Bree, Vanessa, Jenny, Kimberly, Elizabeth, Ashley, Carmen, Alyssa, Taylor, YT, Tyler, Julia FM, Brittany Baby, Morgan, Gloria, Deanna, Emily, Gabby, Lou, Anna J, Mrs. G, Mina, Loe, Vima, Angela, Mina, Riley, John, and Angie. Well, thank you so much for being patrons. Believe me, I appreciate you. Last week, had a really beautiful private message where somebody was really shocked that I noticed they hadn't been around in the chats. And I always notice everybody. Like, I pay attention because you guys support my work. You know, why wouldn't I pay attention to you? You know, I feel rarely privileged with being able to do my life's work and have that be supported. So yes, I do notice when you say hello and introduce yourself. I do notice if you haven't been posting for a while, and I'll wonder like, hey, how are you doing? So yeah, it is with sincere gratitude to each and every patron, whether you've had a shout out in recent times or not. You are truly appreciated, and thank you. All right, let's talk about what's coming up this week. Starting on the 20th. So I talked a little bit about that last week, but what happens on the evening of the 20th in the United States, like as far as our time zone goes, it's probably happening in the Middle East or in Eastern Europe. And this could have to do with those Iran negotiations. This could have to do with Eastern Europe, with Russia and Ukraine. I did have in the 2025 year ahead slides, we could be seeing some issues for NATO, the EU, other international organizations. It could be frenetic. There could be an expansion of conflict in the Levant. We could see some stuff out of Turkey. I know we have an international audience. Remember, we have, 172 countries who tune in now. So, there's that. There's definitely going to be big weather. Australia, keeping my eye on you. New Zealand. We could also see more seismic activity. Maybe something a little bit larger, like 6.0, 6.5, when the moon conjuncts with Pluto early on the 21st. Okay. So, and I really have that more for the Southern hemisphere, but it could be any active region. Earthquakes are very, very hard to predict. I'm usually pretty good at the magnitude, but the location, it requires a lot of study. But let's take a look at a little bit of what's in the headlines, but I'm really not going to go in depth. That's more for the deeper dive on the patron only podcast, which all patrons at the $5 level and up get. Alrighty. And again, the magazine's going to be more of an omnibus for April and May because I just didn't get those articles written. I'll have the May horoscopes and May what's in the headline predictions up end of the week for patrons at the magazine level and up, and then we'll get it out. We may go to a quarterly magazine just because this is it's an incredibly dynamic time. And it is just a lot. I'm putting together a compendium, by the way, of the astrology school articles that I've done in the past and continue to go forth with. That may become its own periodical, just to give you guys, a good solid foundation to understand the beginning parts of astrology, what the planets mean, what the house placements mean, and for the different planets and signs, etc. So, alrighty, let's take a look at just the brief bit here. And by the way, I also do the horoscopes in an audio format now, which is super fun. But we'll get to what's in the headlines just a little bit, just giving you kind of like what to expect Monday and Tuesday for sure. And I tell you, the 25th and 26th are very, very, well, really from the 24th through the 26th, very, very dynamic energy in the outer world. It can be amazing energy for breakthroughs, personal development, self-awareness, self-realization, self-actualization on an individual level. But on a mundane level in the outer world, it is nuts. Okay. It's very, very, very spicy energy. And so the 21st is really Monday, is a very Mondayest Monday. Be careful driving, by the way. It especially, and public transportation could see some issues as well. So with the moon in Aquarius, the moon in Aquarius is sharp and stabby. I want you to think like glass, broken glass. It's shards. It's like an IED. It's static stops communication channels. So we could see a lot of issues with satellites. We could see issues with telecommunications, cell towers. This could be a big solar flare. We could have some big geomagnetic activity going on. I think we're going to see big windstorms. So if you're looking here for the weather, big windstorms, issues with ocean currents, temperatures are fluctuating. We could see sandstorms and even unlikely ice and snow in places that don't normally get it. I do have a solar storm and the northern lights in or both, and this could be at even more visibility at more southern latitudes, so that could be very interesting. I think we could see a banking crisis or issues with currencies, etc., when we go more towards the 21st, 22nd, probably Tuesday more so. And of course, I already talked about an increase of seismic activity. We could see an issue with power plants. And I think we're going to see some issues with diplomacy not working. Okay, so like negotiations are going to break down in different areas of the world between different powers. So that could be really, really fascinating. The 22nd through the 25th, and believe it or not, we really do have the moon in Pisces that long because it happens really, really late at night. The moon in Pisces ain't playing. This is the fury of water. Okay. The fury of water. And again, we could see cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, monsoons. And again, this is global. This isn't necessarily just in the United States. I realize like 95% of my audience is in America. 5% make up the rest of the world. But we can't just be egotistical and complain. And I know most people here are more progressive and more leftist, but you're American centric. You got to understand this is not a big planet. And what happens in one area of the world impacts another. And we're all finding that out economically right now, but we're also finding it out with climate. Just because they're not talking about it that way on the news doesn't mean that's not the reality. So we could hear more about viruses and airborne or foodborne illnesses, waterborne illnesses. These would be in developing countries as much as in the Western or developed countries. We could see some Navy clashes as well. It's a very, very spicy week internationally. And we could hear people having mystic visions or mass hysteria. And this could either be due to something slipped into the water, or you could hear about a cult that put something like shrooms in the brownies or something. It doesn't mean it's necessarily actual mysticism, but we could hear more about mysticism as well. So it could be that there's some interesting archaeological findings that are reported on that have to deal with like early Christianity or an indigenous culture. We could hear about that. People could also be claiming to see visions of mystical beings. People might. I'm a little worried with the moon in Pisces for this one, with people having kind of a spiritual psychosis. Anytime people think they're the one and only messenger, that they've got a special mission from God, the universe, etc., that takes some hubris. If you feel like the fate of the universe is on your shoulders, then you might want to step back a minute, because there's 8 billion people on this planet and we all have a connection if we choose to acknowledge it. So careful with that, guys. We could see big flooding with the moon in Pisces this week in different places in the world. So keep your eyes out for that in the headlines. And we could see more things happening with oil. And this could be anything from an oil depot, a platform, pipelines, discussions around oil, oil imports, exports, oil tankers, anything like that between the 22nd and the 25th. And then to round out the week, we have the moon in Aries, and it's going to be a spicy meatball the 25th through the 27th. We could see acts of war. This could be the negotiations break down. There could be, and this is anywhere in the world. I do not have directions on this. Well, I do, but I will talk about that in the patron only podcast. So make sure if you're a patron, you tune in this week, because I do have some locational information that I'm watching. We could see anything from incendiary devices, heavy smog, smoke, and even gases that ignite. Now, this could be like natural gas pipelines or liquid natural gas, that kind of thing. It could be methane. Okay, so like maybe an old garbage dump goes up, things like that. We could see some mass violence, etc., in the headlines with the moon in Aries. It's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be a spicy meatball. So we'll see what happens. Again, I'll go over this in more detail in the patron only podcast. We could see some military action. Musk may not have a great week this week, and there could be a challenge to the U.S. executive branch and the administration that is less than comfortable. So we could see that over the weekend. I'll talk about that on the patron only podcast more in depth as well. So you can just expect there to be a lot of news. Now, what do you do with all this news? Okay. I've talked about this before. Just because you're aware doesn't give you any power. Okay. In fact, it can disempower you, because we can be overstimulated. We can be overwhelmed. We can feel like it's too much. It can really destabilize us to have that much information. So you want to find things that you can do. And with Mars and Leo moving into opposition with Pluto and Aquarius, it's really, really important to kind of look at what you can do to benefit society, what can you actually contribute? And don't tell me you don't have any skills or gifts or talents. Maybe you're only good at using a nose flute. Well, you know what? That would be something that would lift spirits. Okay. If you're good at comedy, if you're good at writing, you could write poetry. There's things we can do to uplift one another. Maybe you're just good at listening. That's a powerful, powerful skill. Being able to listen. Not everybody needs a megaphone. Okay, that's the problem. George Carlin talked about this a lot in his comedy. He would say in America, everybody thinks their opinion matters, and that their voting gives them democracy. And what it is it's the illusion of choice. Go look up some old George Carlin routines because he was spot on and he wasn't prophetic. He was talking about the time we lived in. Okay, this is an old problem that is up for review. Okay, so what can you do? Well, you can work with yourself. What can you do? Who can you greet in mutuality? Who can you co-create with? Can you find someone, and you don't find someone by sitting at home alone going, I'm all by myself. I don't fit in. Okay. I just had a message from a young person in my life who I absolutely adore, not one of my children. And they were like, they're on vacations in a different country than where they're from. And they were like, I don't fit in. I always stand out like a sore thumb. And I said, well, that's insecurity talking. Nobody actually feels like they fit in. Very rarely do people do. They're usually, if they feel like they fit in, it's because they are not traveling. They're at home. They're in the culture and society they grew up in, and they got the luck of the draw to be able to just be of there and from there. And there's no growth in that space, in the fitting in. There's growth when we are outside of our comfort zone. And so it's important, if you feel like an outsider, if you feel like you're a blue dot in a red state, that you can't find anybody like you, you're going to find out very differently if you actually start commingling. In the awake space, we have tons of people who live in red states who are more progressive. They may not agree on everything, but they pretty much, share similar viewpoints. And I get clients from all of those states that tend to be known as very, very right wing in their governments. But the people that so many, they feel alone. I'm like, you're not alone. I've just read for 5 people from your state in the last 2 weeks. So there's at least 5 of you because you found me. And if 5 of you found me, there's probably 100 more where that came from. And so it's time for people to get out of your head and get out of your sob story and get out of your I'm all alone, I'm isolated, blah blah blah. You know how you aren't isolated? You move forward. You go say hi to somebody. And I'm an introvert. I'm a real introvert. I know you don't think so because I'm on camera, but I wasn't always good on camera either. At voice I was always pretty good at, but camera, nah, it was horrible. I hated it and I wasn't good at it. And I was stiff and weird. And what it took? Practice, because nobody's good at everything the first time around. Okay. It's very rare to be a savant. And if you don't leave your comfort zone, if you don't get out of your house and talk to somebody, and I'm talking about the people who can, okay? If you don't say hello to somebody, that's the first step. The first step is saying hi, and asking how somebody's doing and meaning it, just not just like, hi, how are you? Engage with people, because what they're trying to do is drive division. Find your common ground with people, okay? You don't need to talk politics to do it. You can ask people questions about their lives, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. You can go take a class. Okay. You can go to the library. You can go, sit in a cafe and have a cup of coffee and offer somebody a seat if everything's full. That's how we start. Okay. Will you automatically like every single person you meet? No, but nor do you have to. Nor do you have to be liked by everyone. Okay. We need to normalize that it's okay not to like everybody and not to be liked by everybody, but we can accept the humanity in one another. All right. There are people I can see as human beings and recognize their humanity and know I don't want to hang out with them for an afternoon. But I can appreciate who they are. That's a big difference. We can appreciate one another. All right. That's how we find common ground. Having to discuss and argue over the merits of X, Y, or Z is it's an intellectual exercise, but it isn't necessarily what's going to make the world a better place. Okay. The intellectual arguments. They tend to be somewhat nihilist anyway, and they don't really help us. So what I'm going to say is look forward to the breakthroughs this week on a personal level. Look forward to the opportunities to collaborate with other people. You don't have to do it all alone. Okay. In fact, I was just talking to Susie Evolutionary, and she's really made the wokeastrology.com website, which is where you can book readings with us, look pretty fly. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. She does that, but I don't like to ask her to do stuff, right? Because I don't want to bug her. I know she's busy. She has her business. She's reading at Woke Astrology, as well. And, and she offers all the time. And she said, hey, I know when we work together, we both do better, which is one of my sayings. When one person does better, we all do better. And it's mutual. And I said, you know what? I feel just kind of the same way you do. Like, you don't want to bug me. I don't want to bug you. And so we came to an understanding where, okay, I will ask her to help with a few of the editing things that I need done for astrology lessons and things. Like, I have so many classes that can be edited down and put up as recordings. And it was just this really beautiful exchange today on Sunday, April 20th, of just acknowledging that not wanting to bug people is actually in the way of co-creating. Maybe we're not bugging people when we say yes to an offer for help. How many of you have felt that way, right? Not wanting to bug somebody. I don't mind it when people reach out to me about things, and if I'm not able to answer the question, I can send a resource or let them know where to connect with. And I'm talking about through the Patreon, or when people reach out through the website. That's one of the great ways to be able to connect in with people and to make connection. So that's part of our breakthroughs, is learning how to work with each other again in more productive ways. So look for that. Okay. And I'll leave you with this one last thought. When it comes to this energy this week, is somebody on Blue Sky wrote, I've seen a lot of people quoting Mr. Rogers of look for the helpers. And he was speaking to children. We're all adults. We are the helpers. So there is some way, somehow you can contribute, but stop looking at the biggest picture possible. If there's stuff happening on the federal level and you don't have a network that can make an influence there, look at your local level, because we need to empower each other there. It's very, very important. I've been beating that drum for years. And you can make a difference. Okay. You've just got to take the first step. And a lot of times that's just going and seeing what meetings are available, or asking if there's a Friends of the Library group you can join, or going to a school board meeting, or even just supporting a local small business instead of going to a big chain, but going to the mom and pop shop, depending on what it is you're wanting and how good their customer service is. So there's that. Coming up this week in the Patreon. I didn't have a patron spotlight, but what I did do is we had a wonderful conversation at the Astrologers Roundtable, which is where Damien Susie, Shelby, and I, sometimes Sarah, and our wonderful game master, Andrew, we get together and we play a role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game. Some of you might have heard of D&D, but instead of starting off with the game, we actually recorded us talking about the astrology, and that's going to be our patron spotlight. I think you're going to enjoy the conversation. We talked a lot about how we all feel with Neptune and Aries. It's real astrologer shop talk. And we included in Andrew, and he was like, I don't know, I feel like I don't know enough. And so we're drawing him in. You don't have to be an expert. It's like learning language. You got to be thrown into an immersion situation if you really want to be fluent. So that's something we're going to do kind of on the regular. And then I didn't record the game night just because I have to clean out my cloud on Zoom. My goodness, we're really full. So we have that to look forward to. The Astrologers Roundtable, and our wonderful patron Robert is working on an illustration of us in our character gear, talking shop and talking astrology. So remember, as serious as this world can get, we are all in this wonderful opportunity to integrate with our soul self, our source self into our physical personality. We have this opportunity for growth and co-creative opportunities with one another. And we all get to rise to the occasion to make the world a better place. The world will be better when we make it better. I hope that stays with you and you find ways to make the world a better place. I look forward to your comments on Spotify and YouTube and in the Patreon, of course. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, and I'll be talking to you next week about more shenanigans as we move towards May.